Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. I'm just gonna see how that sounds because I'm using my headphones today instead of my microphone because I feel like it sounded like I was underwater before. So let me just see how that sounds. I still feel like it's a little scratchy. Let me try one more thing. Give me 1 second. I'm having so many difficulties tonight. I'm so frustrated. 1 second. Let me see how that sounds. I'm gonna try one more thing. I don't think anybody's in the chat. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. I gotta see if it's still gonna pick up on the sound if I do it this way. I think it's the best I used to use my microphone to be extra clear. Let me see. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna have to edit this part out because it's so long at this point. But anyway, thank you everybody who will be catching the playback or is currently watching live. This is the part two to my MGM experience, past, present, and future live. Really excited to finish this off. I couldn't leave y'all for too long. Had to come out and finish it again. And I'm pretty sure I left off talking about the Creole woman who was gaslit and like really came for on social media a few months back. And I thought that situation was really crazy how viral it went. And it kind of reminds me of how Tyla's situation is getting so much traction right now, also. So let me get to that slide. And before I get any deeper into it, let me just make sure the sound is good again, because I'm just paranoid about getting too long into it and then the sound sounds crazy. Yeah, the microphone sounds good now. Whatever. I don't know why I was acting funny before. But anyway, so yeah, just to hop right into it. So getting back to the gaslighting of MGMs and specifically Creoles, and I'll be focusing on a few different groups in this presentation. And I'm just going to be starting off with Creoles, specifically Louisiana American Creoles. I know that Creole is a term that's used in a lot of different places, but for this context, I will be talking about the Louisiana Creoles. And even though she is specifically Louisiana Creole, this her situation can be applied, I feel like, to the cultural attitudes that we as African Americans and people in America have towards blackness in general, and kind of like the miscommunication or misunderstanding, you could say, between sometimes maybe black people from, I would say specifically what I call like the the older world, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like just in the world that's what the new world came from. You know what I mean? Like they colonized the new world to create the old world. You know what I mean? So like, people who are from across the pond and stuff like that, because I feel like they do stuff really differently in Europe. And it seems like in Africa and stuff like that, they do things very differently. And a lot of the black people in Europe are first generation Africans and also Jamaicans from, or not just Jamaicans, but Caribbeans, specifically Caribbeans from the Caribbean, and there's even like cultural differences towards blackness and stuff there. So I think that's really interesting. But anyway, so yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ethnic attitudes towards blackness and mixedness in general throughout the diaspora. We really see that playing out online. If it seems like I'm rambling, I'm a little tired, but I just didn't want to wait too long before I did this. But anyway, so I'm going to play a video just to be a little refresher of her situation and what happened with her and why people got, really triggered by her essentially. And also, it's going to be a stitch of her friend cutting in to defend her. So let me pull that up and then we're going to go over this slide.
I was 100% black. I told never said I was 100% black. I told y'all what I was mixed with. I'm multi-ethnic and stop.
Hi, so that's my friend. And I'm really angry because people are on here invalidating her blackness because that's what we do in 2024, apparently. As a member of the Creole community, I completely understand. I'm so sorry. But y'all need to stop telling people that they're biracial. No, we're a mixture upon a mixture upon a mixture, and we just come out real light. Okay? We know what the fuck we are. We know our history. Stop it.
Never said I was 100% black. I told y'all what I was mixed with. I'm multi. multi-ethnic and stop.
Hi, so
Alrighty. So a lot to unpack with just that little, 60 seconds? So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't remember what initially triggered people to start attacking her. I guess because she said she was black and people were like, no, you're not. And they just got mad. She said, I'm Creole. And they were like, no, you're not. I don't understand. Whoop-de-whoop. I don't know. I don't know what happened there. But I just remember seeing her video going around. And of course, I'm identify with and, empathize with any, mixed or multi-generationally mixed, especially person of African descent that's going through some shit like this. So I didn't really need to know like what the situation was, but I just felt bad for her. But yeah, and just to piggyback off where I left off in the last video, I was talking about how like it's not that we understand that we are the product of biracial people, we come from biracial people, but it just catches you off guard, especially when you're somebody like, an older person in our age group, where you've been told your whole life that if you embrace being mixed or you identify too much with being mixed, that you're not being true to your blackness, and you need to identify as black monoracially. You shouldn't even acknowledge your Creole part or your mixed part or whatever it is. And so it's just a shock to grow up and then have a whole bunch of people online telling you, oh no, actually you're not black, even when you look like this woman that I have on the screen or her Creole friend, whomever it is. When you come from that culture, it's really it's a culture shock for you when people start telling you, no, you're not black. You know what I mean? And, the other reason why it's surprising is because people are just starting to grasp the concept of biracial and allowing biracial people to identify comfortably. So that's another reason why it catches you off guard, because it's like, wait a minute, y'all just started letting biracial people rock and y'all really don't. Y'all still give them a hard time. Y'all just started understanding what biracial is, and now y'all don't understand, but I don't even think a lot of people care to understand, honestly, because people who are like this woman are not new in the United States. So I don't really understand where this is coming from either. But yeah, so I think it's interesting. So that's just where the frustration comes from. I feel like it's just like, where is all this coming from, and where's all this sternness about now putting your foot down and wanting people know you need to identify exactly as, XYZ. It's very strange, especially when the narrative used to be the complete opposite for not only multi-generation mixed people, but biracial people also. So everybody's just shocked and confused right now. and the best thing I can compare it to is pulling the wool from pulling the carpet from under your feet. Like that's really how it feels. And then people turn around and gaslight you. And so that brings us perfectly right back to the slideshow. And so this person says they posted it in a Reddit group for Black women, and I wasn't even looking for this. I was just looking for stuff about Creoles, and this happened to pop up, and I thought this discourse was interesting. But the original poster who posted the video in the group says, I feel like, and if you're looking at the screen, it's on what's on the right side. So it says, I feel like what people consider Black or African American is getting more blurry each day, because I genuinely thought this was a white woman. Keep this in mind, okay? I want to repeat this part that I'm going to read one more time before I read the last part. I feel like what people consider Black or African American is genuinely getting more blurry each day, because I genuinely thought that was a white woman. Keep all that in mind. I'm going to move on to the next part. Then she goes on to say, I'm Nigerian, Ghanaian, American, so I have a very limited knowledge of the I'm sorry, I'm struggling with that word, to be honest. Of Creole identity. So please educate me if I'm missing something. Y'all know why I'm crying right now. Y'all know I'm quiet because she's saying, oh, I feel like what we consider Black or African American is getting more blurry by the day. I thought this was a white woman, but then goes on to say that she's Nigerian, Ghanaian American. Now, I agree, you are American. I accept that you're an American, but at the same time, ethnically, you're admitting that you're not Black. Okay, you're admitting that you're ethnically not Black American, I'll say. You're admitting that you're not ethnically Black American, and you have limited knowledge about a very specific Black American ethnic group, or a group that's not necessarily a part. I don't know. I know Creole people who consider themselves their own thing. You know, they're a specific ethnic group, but they do overlap with the African American community. Basically, you're admitting that you don't have a vast knowledge of us. Yeah, you're saying, oh, I don't really understand. I thought this was a white woman. Yeah, you're saying that what is considered black is getting blurred, but you're admitting you're not even from this ethnic group. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's like me taking myself, over to Africa or over to Nigeria and seeing, Nigerians and be like, oh, I feel like what's becoming Nigerian is becoming limited to the day. That would be weird. Even if I lived there for 10 years, why would I even be commenting on that? That's not even my place to talk about. So I noticed that when it comes to African Americans, when it comes to other Black people, there's this, like, I don't know, there's this idea there. And what irritates me is, like, I respect that she's admitting she doesn't know that much and she's asking to be educated. So I do understand that. Just like I don't know that much about Nigerian or Ghanaian culture, and I even said that in my last video. So I'm not going to speak like I'm an expert. But at the same time, I'm also not trying to low key, high key, gatekeep what it means to be a part of that ethnic group. When somebody's telling me I'm not a part of your ethnic group, I'm a part of this ethnic group, you're admitting to not understand, but yet you're putting her TikTok in a group to make an example out of her and essentially to get people to, like, kind of talk shit about her, essentially. So it's all kind of shady. Like, it's very interesting. But can you imagine if a woman that looked like the Creole woman put a picture of a Nigerian or Ghanaian woman in a chat and was like, oh, she doesn't look Black American? Everybody would consider her to be xenophobic and colorist and things like that. But, she feels like she can take the liberty to gatekeep what it means to be Black American, even though this woman is clearly telling her she's Creole and that she's multi-ethnic. And I just have an issue with this because I see this a lot online. And I really this is the energy I get from that conversation with the Creoles. Now, I want to make it very clear. I'm not trying to blame people from other countries or Africans specifically for this issue, because, like I've said multiple times, I'm half Caribbean too, so I not, that's not what it is for me. Like, I believe in, people immigrating over here and multi-ethnicities and stuff like that. But the problem is that if you're coming over here and you're trying to, like, kind of make it seem like you have just as much authority or control over a culture that you don't really necessarily belong to. You came over here, but you don't really belong to it. That's kind of a problem. And so I feel like that's on both sides. Like, it would be the same as an American going to a Caribbean country or going to, a country in Africa or something like that, and trying to now dictate how things are done and trying to tell them, oh no, don't cook like that because that's nasty to me. Don't do this, XYZ. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be cool on either side. And that's kind of what I liken this to. And even though I do feel like it was probably also other Black Americans coming from for this woman also, I will admit I do mostly see this rhetoric, especially regarding mixed people. I do mostly see it from specifically Africans and then next Caribbeans. Caribbeans, not so much, but I do see it from Caribbeans, and I have had my own personal experiences with Caribbeans. Like I've said, I'm Caribbean, so I do have my experiences, but I'm just speaking from what I see online and even socially. And that's why I said I do think that there's a difference between the ideology towards Blackness, I don't know how people feel about this, between like the older world ideology towards Blackness and like the newer world ideology towards Blackness. And I think the main thing about that is slavery. I mean, in this side of the pond, we went through chattel slavery. It is what it is. A lot of us MGMs came about that way. So you can't tell people who grew up in a society and in a culture for all this time, and we were, socialized a certain way, and then you come over here from over there in the 90s admitting you don't really understand, culturally what's happening with the mixed population over here, but you online sitting behind faceless avatars, trying to make people feel insecure about who they are. And yeah, you can say, oh, it's not that big a deal, just ignore people on the internet. And yeah, people on the internet should be ignored. But at the same time, we can't pretend like this is not starting to seep into real life too. Because in low key, the internet is real life. So if you're constantly hearing a certain message, and on top of the fact that there was already pre-existing inter-ethnic issues between African Americans and between Caribbeans and colorism and all that type of shit, it adds for a really bad combination. And I feel like that is why we're seeing this bubble up to be an issue really right now. And the root of it is a lack of education on both sides. And that's not necessarily this woman's fault. But at the same time, when you feel like you have more of an authority towards blackness because you come from Africa, so you feel like you can son other people of African descent, even over here, that's kind of where that attitude comes from. And that's where the vibe I get from a lot of these comments. Because it's like, what's making you think that? And I'm going to just be honest with you. I've been around, I have my criticisms of other mixed and light-skinned people, but I've been around a lot my whole life. I never noticed that. I don't really notice that behavior, trying to police the identities of I don't see light-skinned people doing that to darker hued Black people, specifically like Africans and things like that. Specifically, actually, what I see is that light-skinned people feel the need to be validated by darker skinned Black people, specifically Africans and stuff like that. And that's why I feel like in turn, you'll have like Nigerians and Ghanaians like this woman feeling like, saying like, oh, I feel like what we're considering Black is more blurry by the day. Like, girl, this has been going on for a long time. You just are admitting that you don't understand it. And you're trying to make an example out of this woman in the group. And people end up coming under the thread and like educating and kind of telling her about her, not telling her about herself, but basically people kind of were like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm going to show two different perspectives. Just give me 1 second. I want to get out some water. But so, yeah. So this middle comment says, and I wanted to like give a variety of different perspectives. But anyway, so this middle comment says, I think it's a very nuanced conversation because race is a social construct, because white supremacist legislation deemed anyone with an ounce of blood Black blood a Black person, because the aristocracies of the slave trade resulted in generations of mixed multi-ethnic peoples. And now with integration, we will continue to have generations of multi-ethnic people who grow up with or adjacent to Black families that will identify and align themselves with Black people. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And that's kind of what we were talking about last week in the comments, when we were like, at this point, the whole admixture thing, we can acknowledge differences and we should, and we should be honest about things, but it is a waste of time at this point to sit back to harp on that type of stuff, because number one, is not really no accurate science behind that. It's really not. It's all kind of social stuff. Two, at this point, that ship has sailed. There's really not really any pure people unless you're going to like the South somewhere, deep Mississippi or Gullah Geechee or somewhere like that. There's very few people like that. It just doesn't make any sense. So I feel like when you have Africans who come from Africa, it does seem confusing because it's just a different like situation of what's going on. But yeah, that's basically what's been going on. And that's why it's such a shock to people when people turn around and say, oh no, you're not Black. I thought you were white. I thought you were this. And it's like, it just seems odd, essentially, because this has been going on for so many generations. And based on how this woman, the Creole woman in the video, the one that they were coming for, the way that she talks, she doesn't sound like a white woman to me. Like, she sounds like a Black woman from the South. And people can say, oh, you can't tell by voices. Yeah, you can, but you can tell what culture people come from by how they talk. You can tell a white person with an accent. Like, cut it out. The woman doesn't sound white to me. If I saw this woman walking down the street, I would honestly think she was Puerto Rican. That's what I would think, because I don't know a lot of Creoles, because like I'm in New York. So I've never met a lot of Creoles before. I've met some, but not many. So if I saw her walking down the street, I wouldn't assume she was white, but yeah, I would assume she was like mixed, Puerto Rican, maybe, Black American, but just very light skinned. I wouldn't assume she was white though, but I also would never think she's fully Black either. But at the same time, this is the culture I grew up in, I was socialized in. So it's not weird to me. So, anyway. So the person goes on to say, I'm very open-minded about this discussion. Oh, I forgot. I think this was to add on to what the first woman said. This wasn't a different comment, I think. Yeah, shoot. I just remembered that. But anyway, yeah, I think that was a good explanation though. And so anyway, the full comment was left by another Nigerian American woman, but I think that she was more balanced in her perspective. Clearly she left that comment, but yeah, that's what she was saying. But let me start from the top just to tie into her comment together, because she touched on a lot of different points. That's why it's like I did these notes like a couple of weeks ago and I'm tired. But anyway, So this woman says, in response to the original African woman who posted it in the group, she says, "I'm a Nigerian American, but heavily identity. I think she meant identify. Heavily identify, stand, and empathize with Black Americans. I think it is important to have a great deal of knowledge about the slave trade, American chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and Pan African history. The slave trade and white supremacy has produced a doubt that I feel will never has produced a debt, I'm sorry, that I feel will never reach a solution." Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think that was kind of the idea. I don't think that there will be a solution. I think the solution, I think the solution is education. But do I think there'll ever be a resolution? No, because I don't think you can ever fully resolve 500 years of chattel slavery. Like, child, boy, bye. But anyway, I understand the issue that quote unquote monoracial Black people see. This is where she started to lose me, but I'll get there. I understand the issue that monoracial Black people have with mixed, multi-ethnic people calling themselves Black. A large part of that is that lighter skinned people with more Eurocentric features are more preferred representatives of the Black community. Some of the most influential people throughout history and the most popular figures in the media today are light skinned and multi ethnic people who occupy Black spaces. Okay, and I'm gonna explain why I have an issue with that. My issue is that I always say this, I don't have the issue acknowledging all the isms or having a conversation about how many Black people are color struck and texture struck and all the isms and all that. That is not the problem. But I do have a problem with the conflation, and I don't even know if it's a conflation or so much of an oversimplification, you could call it. I don't know. But anyway, with this whole with her saying like the issue that monoracial people have with mixed or multi-ethnic people have with calling themselves Black is because we're the preferred representative of the Black community. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, like this, this is gonna sound really harsh, but those are two separate problems, and that's not necessarily our problem. We don't have to base our identity because you feel some type of way because colorism is a thing. Now, we can be empathetic and we can be how can I say this? We can be actively working against colorism, but to say, oh, you calling yourself Black, or my issue with you calling yourself Black is because you benefit from colorism. I'm sorry, but that's a very emotionally abusive argument. It's very emotionally abusive. It's extremely emotionally abusive. It's very self-censored. It's very it's kind of narcissistic, honestly, because what other people identify as has nothing to do with you. I base how I identify, how I see myself, my worldview based on how my family raised me, my world experiences, my family history, the countries my family comes from, where I grew up. There were so many factors that played into the 25 plus years of my life that play into how I identify and how I view the world. For you to really think that I'm sitting around shaping my identity because thinking about Eurocentric features and who's the Black representative and who's light skinned and all that is ridiculous. We can have a conversation about, people being the quote unquote preferred representatives for whatever reasons in the Black community and all that, which I don't even believe is a relevant argument anymore. Maybe it was relevant in 1965, but I don't really believe that that's a relevant argument. The conversation now is why are brown skin to dark skin monoracial Black men purposely keeping Black women who look like them out of entertainment and out of representative spaces. That's the conversation. Not light skinned people are occupying certain spaces because they're identifying as Black. That shouldn't be the conversation because that has nothing to do with other people. And that's not really your business. So I don't really like that conflation of arguments. If people can, I don't see how those two have anything to do with each other. I really don't. I don't see what representation has to do with me identifying as Black. And I honestly find it offensive that would be conflated. And it kind of shows that you don't understand our culture if you think that you can oversimplify it that clearly. And there's no hate towards this girl, and it kind of seems like I'm going in on her. But like I said, I feel like she has a good balanced perspective. And I think she genuinely, I don't think she's coming from a bad place. But yeah, and that's kind of one of the main reasons I have this channel because I heard people saying that, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely the fuck not. You're not about to make your desirability politics conversation. You're not about to conflate that with the erasure of my family history. Like, absolutely not. But anyway, she goes on to say, I think that makes this debate even more convoluted. Oh, I think what makes this debate even more convoluted is that quote unquote monoracial Black people are oftentimes mixed themselves, 70% Black, 30 other, give or take, but but phenotypes that are more common within Africans. So the gripe is unambiguously Black people are genuinely worried about racially ambiguous people, pushing them out of spaces of influence and culture. And it is a legitimate concern that we are witnessing in real time. So when it comes to the first part of her comment, I agree the first few sentences to an extent. I think most Black Americans are more so in the 15 to 20 21 25% ish range. I think 30% is pushing it. I think 30% is pushing it. Yeah, I'm just gonna say that. But I do agree that that isn't a real thing. That most, I would say upward maybe 90% of Black Americans are admixed to different degrees. So yeah, basically a lot Black Americans are to a degree a mixed ethnic group. That's absolutely true. But because of how the genes be gening, I mean, you know, somebody who's 13% African, I'm sorry, 13% European is not going to look the same as somebody who's 30% European, which is why I'm saying like that's kind of pushing it. So I do agree with what she was saying. But this whole like erasure thing and people being confused with racially ambiguous people pushing them out of spaces of influence and culture, I don't see what that has to do with people identifying as Black. I see what it has to do, but like I'm saying, I'm sorry, it's a strongman argument. It really is a strongman argument because those two things aren't mutually exclusively related. They're not. It's you talking about how it makes people identify, and then all of a sudden you throwing in the representation thing in there. Just admit you want some attention too. And a lot of other creators online are talking about this. Like, shout out to Divested Zealot. I say this, repeat that she said this all the time. In the Black community, attention is currency. Attention is currency in the Black community. If you really listen to a lot of these conversations about the way mixed people identify and people feel some type of way about people identifying themselves as Black, and you're going to see this consistently throughout the comments I show, it's always about attention and who's seen as pretty and whoop-de-whoop. Yeah. It is. I noticed that, and that's kind of the issue I have. I'm like, for me, this is about family history and like just I can't describe it. Like, yeah, family history, and there's way deeper issues to me why mixed and light skinned people are identifying the way that they do or saying the things that they do. So when you keep bringing it back to representation and looks, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's about that for you. That's not what it's about for this Creole woman, though. Like, you talking about looks. She didn't say in none of those Creole women's responses or the videos did they say anything about looks, anything about representation. But notice how that's what they're talking about. That's what they're focused on. And they're not even African American. So mind you, African Americans whose family have been here for generations, they're not complaining about these Creole women erasing them, but these Nigerian women are. I think that that's really interesting. But anyway, let me try to hurry up because I'm spending too much time on this. So it says, what I'm not about to do, though, is sit on the internet and argue with folks about their racial identities, especially if it's not giving Rachel Dolezal or whatever she goes by now. So yeah, I already read that part. She says, I think I'm very nuanced about the conversation because race is a social construct, blah, blah, blah. Then she goes on to say, I'm very open-minded about the discussion, open to being told to shut up and when I should go sit down somewhere and eat my plantain chips. He he he. That's funny. Now I wouldn't tell somebody to do that, but I will educate you though. But it says, and I understand the frustration that unambiguously Black people have towards racially ambiguous Black people laying claim to Blackness. At the end of the day, this discussion is a byproduct of white supremacy and anti-Blackness. Agreed. There is so much more to this that I can't even touch on in a reasonable amount of time or characters. I truly empathize with everyone involved. And she says, edit to add. Apparently, one or more of this woman, of the woman in this video, is Creole, and the ethnically specific. This is ethnically specific to Americas in the regional South, and that's why I was saying old world, new world. The whole Creole thing, that's something very specific to like really the development of colonization, because they have Creoles in Africa also. But how did those Creoles come about? Because of European colonizers. They didn't just spring up out of the coconut trees. Like, come on now. But anyway, so she said, Southern people, regardless of racial background, understand the nuances of these women's identities. They probably don't even identify solely as Black, but align with the Black people because of the way Blackness has shaped and socialized their ethnic cultural identity. And I think that was an excellent way to summarize it. So I do give kudos to this woman, because I do think that she is trying to understand. And I do think that she means well in what she's saying. So I hope I didn't like annihilate her too much. But I do agree with the last part of what she said, and I definitely see that. But anyway, I've already spent way too much time speaking about this particular topic. But let me move on to the next slide. Child, this one is a trip. So this one says, so this person was very, very triggered, very, very mad. And I'm pretty sure this person actually is Black American. So this person says, she needs to stop all that crying because she knows she's not Black. She doesn't look Black, and I'm sure she's not treated as Black. If she was raised Black, that would mean a white woman raised Black would be Black. If her DNA says 75 more African, then she's Black. She claims this because she is the preference in the Black community. She benefits from this. My dad is second generation biracial. This is something he finally had to accept. 60 years of being forced to believe he was Black by white society. Creoles are the same, multi-generationally mixed, not Black. So I noticed that she kind of, or this person, they low-key, high-key contradict themselves. I didn't even notice this when I first screenshotted this comment. But first she says, oh, if she was she says, oh, she doesn't look Black and she wasn't treated as Black. But then she says, oh, her father, who is second generation biracial, so multi-generationally mixed, basically. So she says her father, who is mixed, he had to accept this after being forced to believe he was Black by white society. So she's saying that the woman was treated better because it was not treated as Black, but she's saying that her father had to finally accept that he's a preference in the Black community after being treated as Black by white people. Like, she completely contradicted herself. Like, the whole comment just doesn't make any sense. But I just wanted to empathize, and I don't want to spend too much time paying attention to dumb shit no more. But I just wanted to point out how this person's whole thing is, oh, they literally say, with the part I highlighted, if her DNA says more than 75% African, then she's Black. First of all, who's putting a cap on these percentages, and who's walking around with DNA markers on their forehead being like, oh yeah, I'm this person Black, I'm that person Black? It's just stupid. And this is why people say leave the DNA tests, like just throw them out, because they're just causing too much trouble at this point, because this is just stupid. And we don't know how many people are going to actually meet that, because Condoleezza Rice, ain't she like 61% Black? So you can't even tell with people. But anyway, oh yeah, she said she claims Black because this benefits her. She is a preference in the Black community. She benefits this. I'm gonna read this again. She claims this because she is a preference in the Black community. She benefits this. from this. So this person believes that she only identifies as black because she's a sexual preference. And that's what I was saying with the other clip. It's always about sexual desirability about them. They can't even empathize that we grew up in a highly racist society that, as people say, one drop rules people. And isn't it interesting how in one breath we're constantly hearing about the one drop rule, how the one drop rules, but one dropping everybody into blackness. George Washington's black, Mexicans are black, Chinese are black, everybody's black. Because according to the one drop rule. Yeah, when people like this come up and people see the real life product of the one drop rule, because this woman is probably like 30% African or something. When people see the real life product of the one drop rule, then all of a sudden they act brand new and they don't understand why this woman would be calling herself black, and they don't understand what, you know, highly mixed people look like. I think it's very interesting. And this person is claiming to have a mixed parent, which I mean I believe, but it just shows you how deep the lack of education is. But I just wanted to empathize how this is a lot, very much so, about desirability for other groups of people. And multi-generation mixed people, Creole people, whoever, we be sitting up here telling people how this is like a deeply rooted thing that we've been dealing with our entire fucking lives. Here come other people talking about desirability politics and how it's about representation for them, and they're worried about being erased in the media. And it's like, okay, we can have a conversation, like I've said, about media representation, but what does that have to do with the past 200 years of a certain history that mixed and light-skinned people have had to deal with and had to live under? You don't have no empathy for that. You don't have no empathy for all the shit that we went through Jim Crow and slavery and everything from, you know, Reconstruction, all that type of stuff. You don't give a rat's ass about none of our pain or none of the stuff that our families went through, but you're worried about you not seeing yourself on social media or in TikToks. Like, it's ridiculous. Or worried about who, you know, niggas want to smash. This is ridiculous. So anyway, let's move on. And so this is a comment from a Creole woman. And so from here, we're going to wrap up the Creole section. And I just thought that this was a really great way to summarize like what I'm talking about here and what a lot of MGM people are feeling. And so this girl says, "Thank you for talking about this thank you for talking about the confusing inconsistencies in the logic the Black Americans have about us. Most of my life, I was told just identify as Black because it's how white people see me. But when I went to a majority Black school and people asked me what I was, I would say Black. They would argue with me and even get mad at me. I literally had one boy in math class that would harass me almost every day because of my skin color. He would go around asking people what they thought I was and try to convince me I look white. I do not. But don't light-skinned people not go through colorism though? Ain't this the non-colorism that light-skinned people go through? Ain't this the pedestalization that light-skinned people constantly go through? Very interesting. But anyway, let's move on. And you know that amongst people of color, telling somebody they look white, that's actually an insult. People pretend, oh, they pedestalize you and they say you look beautiful because you look white. But no, actually, amongst Black people, Hispanic people, telling somebody that they look white is actually an insult. That's why they get so triggered when I say that white Latinos exist, because they think I'm trying to be insulting when I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm trying to be genetically accurate. But anyway, so she says, but the second I embrace my Creole heritage and my light skin color, I get told I'm lying about being mixed just because both of my parents are MGM, that I sound colorist when I call myself light skin, and that I need to denounce my non-Black heritage to show my loyalty for Black Americans. Yes, people have said this before. You really cannot win. Yeah, I've had all that stuff said to me and about me also. I can completely relate. And I'm not even Creole, and they've said this type of shit to me, so I can definitely believe her. So then she ends it and says, and I find it strange that people feel like they can speak on how Louisianans classify themselves socially when our culture is very different from the rest of African Americans. Just like how people felt like they could speak on that one South African singer, Tyla, and how she identifies as colored. Stay tuned for that video, because oh, you know I'm gonna eat in that video. You know I got a lot to say. But anyway, so she said, mixed people have their own classification over there, and yet she got backlash from Black Americans. And yet she got backlash from Black Americans. Race is a social construct, and different areas will have different ways of classifying people. I don't understand why so many people can't comprehend that. Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's not just Africans coming at African Americans or Creoles or Dominicans, and coming at us and saying that, just coming for us. It's not just that. It's going both ways. Even you see Black Americans were coming from Tyler. We're coming for Tyler. And you see Black Americans coming for Afro-Latinos, coming for Dominicans specifically. So you see it in both ways. You see it coming from a lot of different people. So I just want to make it clear. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to blame Africans for that or saying that they're the only people doing that. It seems to be an issue amongst the African diaspora of a miseducation about the Afro mixed race groups. And I think that compiled on with years of negative stereotypes, coupled in with, the triangulation that has occurred from racism, white supremacy, and colonization, I think it's all just bubbling to the surface now and just creating a really toxic, just mix of just resentment, animosity, and just years of built up tension that was never addressed. But anyway, so we're going to move on to the next slide. Sorry, I had to get some water. So next I want to talk about Cape Verdeans. So Cape Verdeans are very interesting to me because they're actually another mixed group from Africa. So funny, we were just talking about Tyler. That led us right into talking about Cape Verdeans. And so I should have brought up a map, but Cape Verde, I believe it's right off the coast of West Africa. It's not too far from Guinea, I'm sorry, Mali, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but yes, off the coast of West Africa. Very interesting place. I don't know much about Cape Verde, but I'm gonna show y'all some videos about Cape Verde and about people explaining who they are. So just give me 1 second.
Verde and the islands off of the west coast of Africa.
Black.
But yeah, so I'm gonna put the Cape Verdean spotlight on Coi Leray because I feel like that's one of the most relevant celebrities that is Cape Verdean, today. And shout out to Irby in the chat because he also mentioned that what's that girl's name? Amber Rose is also Cape Verdean. And what I love about Cape Verdeans and why I relate to them so much, even though I don't know much about their culture, is that they're such a clear example of MGM groups, and they're just so much like Afro-Latinos and Louisiana Creoles and even light-skinned people just that are Black American. I just think it's so interesting the similarities in cultures. And I didn't even know about Cape Verdeans until relatively recently. I didn't even know what Amber Rose was. I thought, I didn't even know. So I thought that was very cool. So every time I hear about a new mixed group, I always go look them up and go figure out what celebrities are, MGM also. So, representation matters. But anyway, Coileray is a great example of a multi-ethnic MGM like myself. So on both sides of her parents, both of them are multi-generationally mixed, but she's also multi-ethnic. So I'm gonna play the video of her explaining that, and then I'm also going to play the video of Benzino, who is unfortunately her dusty father. And we're just going to use him for the sake of this video. I'm not endorsing Benzino or any of his shenanigans on Love and Hip Hop or the way he treats his daughter or anything like that. I'm simply just using them as a phenotypic example. And shout out to Coileray, that's my girl. Love her style, love her music, everything like that. Sorry you had a dusty father. But yeah, anyway, let's get into the video.
I'm Puerto Rican, Black, Cape Verdean, and that's it.
And which do you get from your mother and your father?
All right, so my mother is Black, and my father is Puerto Rican and Cape Verdean.
Speak any other languages aside from English?
No, I don't speak any other languages. However, like I could.
Yeah, but anyway, she didn't really say much more in the video, but I thought that was cute, But yeah, like she said, her mother is Black American and her dad is Puerto Rican and Cape Verdean. So yeah, she's an excellent example of an MGM. So now let's hear her dusty father Benzino talk about his Cape Verdeanness. Sorry, I didn't realize the video was playing, so I'm gonna replay her video and then I'm gonna play. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the music with the background music was playing, so I'm gonna replay her video in case y'all didn't hear it, and then I'm gonna replay his video. I'm sorry, I be having a struggle stream sometime, y'all. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it together.
I'm Puerto Rican, Black, Cape Verdean, and that's it.
And which do you get from your mother and your father?
All right, so my mother is Black, and my father is Puerto Rican and Cape Verdean.
Speak any other languages?
You know what I'm saying? Cape Verdean. Of Portuguese descent. Right. You know what I'm saying? Those who don't know Cape Verde, the islands off of the west coast of Africa. You know what I'm saying? Cape Verdean people of Portuguese descent. Right. You know what I'm saying? But just like everything that mixed in with Africans, that's what Cape Verdeans are. Beautiful people. Yeah. Gorgeous people, man. Yeah. Beautiful people. The hardworking people too. Yeah. Proud people. A lot of people. I didn't know about my Cape Verdean until later. Because like I told Chastity, I said, when I went to school, it was black, white, or other. Right. And, I'm putting black. And then I'm picking my head and it hurts. I'm black, my nigga. Shit, fuck. Say the fuck. Yeah, so that's how I never looked at myself as light skinned ever.
Them hood light skinned niggas gotta be 25,000 times more Black than everybody else, man. Let me stop. No, them hood, yeah, bro. I grew up in New York City. Don't even get me started, because these light-skinned Spanish dudes out here, they gotta be 25,000 times more Black than everybody else, especially the dudes on the hood. Like, I mean, it's cute or whatever, but I just noticed that. So I thought it was interesting that he pointed that out. I just wanted to, that he said that. I was like, very interesting. That tracks with what I've noticed. But anyway, let me finish.
I never got into the light skin shit. I would look at Prince and them niggas is light skin. You see what I'm saying? That's how I was. Those who don't know Cape Verde and the islands off of the west coast of Africa.
He said he looked at Prince and those niggas as light skinned. Benzino, stop the cap. Now y'all know that they was making comments about Benzino being some light skinned nigga in the 80s. They was definitely talking about him. Like, Benzino, stop it. You don't got a cap. Cut it out. Like, but anyway. I'm gonna leave Benzino alone. But yeah, so that's Cape Verdeans. Very cool, very interesting, beautiful people. But yes, I just want to read this comment left by a Cape Verdean person. So let me put it back on the screen. And so it's just interesting how basically all mixed groups deal with essentially the same thing. It seems like, I guess it's I don't know if it's even just the attitude in this country or maybe the attitude created from colonization. I don't know, but I think it's very important to, share our experiences and basically compare notes and be like, listen, everybody's going through the same thing. So clearly there's a pattern here. So anyway, so this person says, I'm from Cape Verde, an archipelago of 10 islands off the west coast of Africa. And here we identify ourselves as mestizo or Creole people, resulting from the mixture of Africans and Portuguese. We also, because of this two race thing, one white and one black, created by the US, also receive criticism from Americans and Africans. So Cape Verdeans are getting it from both directions because they're literally from Africa. So they're getting it from other Africans, and then they're also getting it from Black Americans, but also white Americans also because they have a different context towards racialization. So it's really interesting. So anyway, they go on to say they even come up with the narrative that we don't know who we are, but in fact they don't know who we are. They say that about mixed people literally everywhere. It's very interesting. But anyway, we Cape Verdeans know that even though we are part of Africa, we are not 100% African. And I am talking not only about genetics, but also our Creole language and our Creole culture. So I thought that was very cool. I don't know if I'm gonna touch on this because it's not really relevant to what. So I'm gonna go into the next slide. So I want to move on and touch on kind of how that connects, how what the Cape Verdean person was talking about, how that connects to how the racial binary in the US harms Afro-Indigenous Latinos. And so I thought that this was a very interesting conversation that connects directly to what, like I said, what the Cape Verdean was talking about. And this was actually a mutual I had on Threads not too long ago before I annihilated my account. But anyway, so I'm just going to read what they said. And it was really interesting because some of these terms I've never heard before. So be patient with me with the pronunciations. But anyway, so they say, let me explain. In Puerto Rico, I am Iselino, meaning the majority of my ancestry is Canarian. I thought that was really interesting. Canarian. Yeah, Canarian. Yeah, very interesting. I've never heard of that group before. And I've never heard that term either. But it says, under the Spanish casta system, this is closer to being a mestizo than anything else. But being that I am not of Spanish ancestry and in no significant portion at least, but also would never count myself as indigenous because that's just being a pretendian. The color in my family is either, Canary or from our West African ancestry because my grandmother, for instance, is Mulatto. In the US, I don't get white coded because people think I'm Middle Eastern, which is dope, but I'm not. Being being Iselino means of mixed ancestry, etc. means nothing in the colloquial American racial lens, especially online, because it's a more because it's more absolute than not and does not lend much room for nuance that can exist. And it's decadeful and it's deceitful, if not finical, to call myself Taino when I'm not. There's actually indigenous people in Latin America who are treated as second-class citizens still. I'd be cosplaying offensively for clout. Anywho, sorry. Anywho, what I'm saying is the internet's conceptualization of American racial lens categories are actually confusing and do not align up with my lived experiences. So that was very wordy, but I think that that was an interesting take. Essentially, in layman's terms, what he's saying is that genetically, what he is and what he's called in Puerto Rico, there's not really a definition for that in the American racial context. So he really has no way to contextualize himself or to categorize himself when having these racial conversations online, because in the American context of race, he really doesn't, somebody like him doesn't exist. And because they're only, if you are talking about, I don't know, I can't even describe it, but he's not even, it seems like, of significant Spanish ancestry. So a lot of people don't even know probably what his, ancestry is and things like that. So I just thought that was a very interesting take. And yeah, it just shows how, mixed people from different parts of the world are really going through the same issues, really, no matter where they're located. And once they come to this country, they get hit with a dilemma of, whatever you see yourself as from your country or in your culture or whatever may not align with the federally accepted terms of race. And you're going to have to shift your identity and your mindset to accommodate that. And that can be really challenging for people. So anyway, let's move on to the next slide. So this slide touches on the concept of mulatto, the term of mulatto in the US versus Latin America. And so the original comment says, in Latin America, the term mulatto, is used to describe black, white. I don't know why this term is not used in the US. Perhaps somebody can educate me. And so the person responds, and I wanted to talk about this because this is a term that's used basically all over the world. And so it is kind of interesting. And people have different opinions about it all over the world, but it is just, to me, interesting how that is a racial, an actual racial term. In some places, I know in Cuba, it's actually on the census. It's actually a real term. I have family members who have been categorized as mulatto, both here in America and in the Caribbean. So yeah, it's very interesting. But anyway, so the person responds back and says, unlike the rest of the colonial empire, however, interracial marriages and miscegenation were illegal until the 1960s. So they're talking about the United States. So in fact, children born, quote unquote, mulatto were inherently criminal. In the US, the term mulatto, which as described above is a derivative from mule, animal, considered incapable of breeding, was only added to the census to specifically to measure the feebleness of mixed offspring, which all these damn words, phronogenalist eugenic race science thought would necessarily die out after one generation. When they realized that mixed kids were not inherently inferior nor inferior, and they be having little typos and shit, so it's not just me, y'all. They recognize mulattoes as black, and it was that way until 2000 when the census added 2 or more races. That's not true. That's actually not true. I actually know that's for a fact that's not true. So not only is mulatto an inherently offensive idea, it's rooted in hypodescendent pre-enology and has been largely used in this country for eugenics. See, this comment was actually a mixed bag because in one hand, they are correct about the whole like criminalizing of like interracial marriage and like quote unquote mulatto people or whatever. But that's not necessarily true that that they took it off the census in 2000. They had took mulatto off the census in the 30s in certain states. So I don't know where this person's getting their information from, but I do think they did a good job of explaining why in the United States we don't use that term. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't been able to find any hardcore evidence that the term mulatto singularly comes from that definition. Do I feel like there was mythology, racist mythology that played into that connotation in the United States? Yes. But I do think that the term mulatto, I do think, and where it comes from with Arabic and all that type of stuff, I do think that there's probably deeper meanings behind that. That people, Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like it's that simple. The whole donkey mule thing. I don't think it's that cut and dry. But anyway, let me see. What do I want to move on to? I think I'm gonna do these last two slides and then wrap it up because I'm getting mad sleepy. So anyway. So in this next slide, I want to talk about racism in Brazil and if there's a concept of light skin privilege in Brazil, because we hear about Brazil being this like racial utopia and how everybody has their own categories and all this stuff, and it's just a one drop rule free paradise. So, I've been doing a lot of research on Brazil the last few months just to, see how the situation is out there, because I knew a little bit about it, but not that much about their history. So, it's very interesting what kind of they talk about. And yeah, it kind of seems like same thing, different. Yeah, same thing, different day out there. But anyway, so this comment, I didn't show his picture, but this was actually left by a light-skinned Black man. And so he says, in response to a video about another Black Brazilian talking about their experience with racism, and this person, in my opinion, looked very, very mixed. So it just goes to show you what's going on down there, even if they project themselves as being this highly multicultural, multiracial society. So anyway, the Brazilian person responds and says, "This video was incredible to see. I'm Brazilian, and to this day, race is a very difficult topic here in Brazil. Even though we're a mostly Black country outside of Africa, we are still fighting daily to survive, to have the same opportunities as white Brazilians. In all Latin America, we got the most whitening policies, so blanqueamiento. So they got the most blanqueamiento policies in the past. But even the light-skinned Black people goes through vertical racism every day here. Other than that, we're fighting to love ourselves as Black people, but we still thrive. One love." Yeah, you could say he's not saying that much, but I feel like he's saying a lot while saying so many. He's essentially saying they did all that blanqueamiento in just to be left with a bunch of light-skinned folks that they just want to be racist to. That's essentially what he's saying. And that is essentially what's going on in Latin America, basically. But anyway, I'm starting to go fast because I'm getting tired. But I just wanted to throw that in there because I think that there is a misconception about Latin America that like people who are perceived as like mulatto or quote unquote what we call here light skin Black or light skin or biracial or mixed or whatever, because they have a high biracial population out there, also of first generation biracial people. So they do have MGMs, but they also do have a lot of biracial people. I don't hear people talking about that. I actually knew a family. It was a white American father and an African mother. I think she was Kenyan. They had the cutest little boy. They had a little son, and they actually intentionally moved to Brazil because they thought that it would be better for them as a family. And I completely agree. Even though as a child, I had a very naive view to race and I didn't take into account the racism of Brazil at all. And of course, I didn't know any of this shit that I'm reading. I didn't know anything about blanqueamiento or colorism or anything at that time. But I still agree that, in my opinion, I do feel like as a mixed person, for a mixed child, it's better for them to grow up in a society where they have a lot of other people who look like them. Even if, yeah, the society is still Eurocentric and they still may have to do with racism, from their non-Black counterparts, I still think that growing up in a society where there's a lot of people who come from multiracial families and who are multiracial themselves, it just makes sense. If you have the funds and the money to be able to move to a place like that, I don't blame you. So to this day, I still support their decision to move out there. And I wish I knew how they were doing, but yeah, they actually intentionally moved to Brazil. So, I do wonder if at that time they knew any about this, or did they have an over romanticized view where, especially, and I love the mother to death, but, they were very sweet to me. But I have to be honest, I wonder if, her being an African woman, I wonder if she maybe thought that maybe her son will have an easier time because he's mixed. Maybe he'll get favoritism out there because there are more mixed people. So maybe they'll favor other mixed people. And he clearly looked biracial. He looked very, very obviously biracial to me. So he didn't lean more towards either side. But I think about that looking back because it's just interesting to think about. Because I've even thought about for myself, like, oh, should I move back to the Caribbean? Should I move, around into like a Latin American country or something? But now that I'm older and knowing what I know, I think there are benefits in living in a society like that. But I also know to not over romanticize it either. So that's why I just wanted to include this comment. But yeah, let's move on to the next comment. So this person says, in Brazil, we have a different approach to race, since we are very mixed and our fascist movements had a very different rhetoric from the American ones for this reason. Okay, be patient with me with this word. Integralismos, for example, worked with the vague idea of national identity and supposedly accept all races, but aims to erase African, indigenous, and other religions that are not European and Catholic. And I spoke about this in my in part one, when we were talking about how, unfortunately, historically, during colonization, they did use a lot of tactics in other countries. They did purposely use, intermarrying and intermixing as a form of erasure. And that sounds, blunt and hard to hear, but that is, when you think about 𝙀𝙢𝙢𝙀𝙢𝙢𝙀𝙀 and like improve the race and like all this type of stuff, where I think people go wrong is that it's not that they were saying, oh, we want to mix with other people and create multicultural families because we don't want to be Black and we just want to be just straight up mixed. No, they were mixing because they wanted to be white. So they were mixing with the goal of getting rid of these quote unquote mulattoes. And there's even like a saying, I know it's in Brazil too, but I know it's in other countries too, where it's like basically like mulattoes were like the next step to whiteness. So it's like you represent like you being a like quote unquote a light-skinned Black person or being mulatto represents the next step before your family is completely improved. I don't know how to say it in Spanish or anything, but basically this is what it's saying. You're basically the first step to it being improved. So you're just one more generation away from whiteness. So you couldn't quite achieve whiteness yourself. But you can go get with the white man or you can go get with the white woman and create hopefully a baby that's able to pass into whiteness. And in Latin America, they would be able to. In America, they weren't. So the only difference is that basically in Latin America, they were saying, this is going to sound really harsh, but I have to be blunt about it. They were saying you can breed yourself into whiteness and integrate into our society and know that your future generations will have a better life than you because they're not Black or because they're not mulatto, because they're not white. So you bred your family to be better. But you have to let go of your Africanness. You have to let go of your indigenousness. You have to, to let go of parts of who you are. As we're in America, they were basically saying, no, there's basically nothing you can do. The minute you got a drop of Black in you, we want you to stay over there. Homer fucking Plessy, don't get on our train rides, and we're just going to do this to keep it simple. Because at a certain point, we can't gauge who the mixed people are and who the pure white people are, and because shit gets too confusing after one generation, and we don't want to even deal with it, so we're just going to push you and your offspring over there because we don't want any funny business, and don't let us find out that you had a Black or mulatto grandma and you over here trying to run for office. We not finna do that because you're not about to take your white resources and and your white privilege and go take it to your Black grandmother or your mulatto mother. That's not what's about to happen. So that's basically what was going on in America. So it's very interesting. So that's what I get. So even with the one drop rule, I don't even get the vibe that they were like, oh, we don't want you to be mixed. They were basically saying like, we don't care what degree of mix you are. You're not getting any form of like social, I don't know. I can't describe it. That's the vibe I get because like I said, you could identify, I've said in other videos, you could identify as mulatto up until the 1930s. So while they were enforcing one drop rules, they were calling people mulatto. If you read documents about runaway slaves, they'll call people mulatto. They'll say they have gray eyes. They'll say they're very light skinned. So white people have never been coy to who the light skinned people are or mulattoes or anything like that. it was simply about, you know, how they were socially categorizing you, kind of like what they were talking about in that slide, where to go with the whole us versus them thing. Where is it? Yeah, like with it, you know, it's just about what benefits the us versus the them. You know, in Latin America, it was okay. We don't mind if you integrate with us as long as you let go of your culture. In the United States, it was no, we want to completely segregate from you, separate but equal. I don't give a shit what you do over there on your side. Just stay away from me. As where the Spanish were a little bit like, you know, okay, we can roll around in beds with each other, but you know, just pretend you're not actually black, or just hide your African heritage. Just look down on your indigenous heritage, you know. Interesting stuff.